History of the Jews by John Murray in 1830. Picking back up in Book 1. At length the patriarch died, and was buried in Machpelah by Ishmael and Isaac, who met in perfect amity to perform the last duty to the head and father of their tribes. Such is the history of their great ancestor, preserved in the national records of the Jewish people, remarkable for its simplicity and historic truth, when compared with the mythic or poetic traditions of almost all other countries. The genealogies of most nations, particularly the Eastern, are lost among their gods. It is impossible to define where fable ceases and history begins, and the earlier we ascend, the more indistinct and marvelous the narrative. In the Hebrew record, it is precisely the converse. God and man are separated by a wide and impassable interval. Abraham is the emir of a pastoral tribe, migrating from place to place, his stations marked with geographical accuracy and with a picturesque simplicity of local description. Here he pitches his tent by some old and celebrated tree, there on the brink of a well-known fountain. He is in no respect superior to his age or country, excepting in the sublime purity of his religion. He is neither demigod, nor mighty conqueror, nor even sage, nor inventor of useful arts. His distinction is the worship of the one great God, and the intercourse which he is permitted to hold with this mysterious being. This is the great patrimonial glory which he bequeaths to his descendants. Their title to be considered the chosen people of the Almighty is their inalienable hereditary possession. This is the key to their whole history, the basis of their political institutions, the vital principle of their national character. The life of Isaac was far less eventful, nor is it necessary for the right understanding of the Jewish history to relate its incidents so much at length as those of the great progenitor of the Jewish people. At first, the divine promise of a numerous posterity proceeds very slowly towards its accomplishment. After some years of barrenness, Rebekah bears twins, already before their birth seeming to struggle for superiority, as the heads and representatives of two hostile people. They were as opposite in their disposition as in their way of life. The red-haired Esau was a wild hunter, and acquired the fierce and reckless character which belongs to the ruder state of society to which he reverted. Jacob retained the comparative gentleness of the more thoughtful and regular pastoral occupation. It is curious to observe the superior fitness in the habits and disposition of the younger Jacob to become the parent of an united and settled people. Though the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, ranked in civilization far above the marauding Bedouins, who sprung from Ishmael, though Esau himself possessed at a later period considerable wealth in flocks and herds, Yet the scattered clans of the Edomites, at perpetual war with each other and with their neighbors, living, according to the expression of the sacred writer, by the sword, retain as it were the stamp of the parental character, and seem less adapted to the severe discipline of the Mosaic institutions, or to become a nation of peaceful husbandmen. The precarious life of the hunter soon laid him at the mercy of his more prudent, or rather crafty brother. After a day of unsuccessful hunting, Esau sold his right of primogeniture for a mess of herbs. The privilege of the firstborn seems to have consisted in the acknowledged headship of the tribe, to which the office of priest and sacrificer was inseparably attached. Esau, therefore, thus carelessly threw away both his civil and religious inheritance, and abandoned all title to the promises made to his tribe. Whether the parental blessing was supposed of itself to confer or to confirm the right of primogeniture is not quite clear, but the terms in which it was conveyed by Isaac, "Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down before thee," seem to intimate a regular investiture with the supreme authority as head of the tribe. This blessing, couched in these emphatic words, which Isaac evidently doubted his power to retract, was intercepted, with the assistance of his mother, by the subtle and unscrupulous Jacob. These repeated injuries roused the spirit of revenge in the indignant hunter. He only waits the decease of his father, that he may recover his rights by the death of his rival. But Rebekah anticipates the crime. Jacob is sent to the original birthplace of the tribe, partly to secure him from the impending danger, partly that, avoiding all connection with the Canaanites, he may intermarry only with the descendants of his forefathers. On his way to Mesopotamia, the promise made to Abraham is renewed in that singular vision, so expressively symbolical of the universal providence of God, the flight of steps uniting earth and heaven, with the ministering angels perpetually ascending and descending. In commemoration of this vision, Jacob sets up a sort of primitive monument, a pillar of stone. The adventures of Jacob among his nomadic ancestors present a most curious and characteristic view of their simple manners and usages. His meeting with Rachel at the well, the hospitality of Laban to his sister's son, and his agreement to serve 7 years to obtain Rachel in marriage. The public ceremony of espousals in the presence of the tribe. The stratagem of Laban to substitute his elder for his younger and fairer daughter, in order to bind the enamored stranger to 7 years longer service. The little jealousies of the sisters, not on account of the greater share in their husbands' affections, but their own fertility. The substitution of their respective handmaids. The contest in cunning and subtlety between Laban and Jacob, the former endeavoring to defraud the other of his due wages, and at the same time to retain so useful a servant, under whom his flocks had so long prospered, the latter, apparently, by his superior acquaintance with the habits of the animals which he tended, and with the divine sanction, securing all the stronger and more flourishing part of the flocks for his own portion. The flight of Jacob, not as so rich a resident, ought to have been dismissed with mirth and with songs, with tabret and with harp. Laban's religious awe of one so manifestly under the divine protection, Rachel's purloining and concealment of her father's teraphim, above all, their singular treaty, in which Laban at length consents to the final separation of this great family, with which he had expected to increase the power and opulence of his tribe. All these incidents throw us back into a state of society different not merely from modern usages, but from those which prevailed among the Jews after their return from Egypt. The truth and reality of the picture is not more apparent than its appropriate locality in the regions which it describes. It is neither Egyptian nor Palestinian, nor even Arabian life. It breathes the free air of the wide and open plains of inland Asia, where the primitive inhabitants are spreading, without opposition or impediment, with their flocks and herds and camels, over unbounded and unoccupied regions. Isaac, in the meantime, had continued to dwell as a husbandman towards the southern border of the promised land. Early in life, he had begun to cultivate the soil, which amply repaid his labors. He seems to have been superior to the native population in one most useful art, not improbably learned by his father in Egypt, that of sinking wells. The manner in which the native herdsmen drove him from place to place as soon as he had enriched it with that possession, so invaluable in an arid soil, indicates want of skill, or at least of success, in providing for themselves. Perhaps it was as much by ignorant neglect as by wanton malice that the Philistines suffered those formerly sunk by Abraham to fall into decay and become filled with earth. Jacob had crossed the Jordan with nothing but the staff which he carried in his hand. He returned with immense wealth in cattle, flocks, asses, and camels, male and female slaves, and with the more inestimable treasure of 11 sons, born to him in Mesopotamia. But before he could venture to return to his father, he must appease the resentment of his injured brother. Upon the borders of the land of Canaan, at a place called Mahanaim, from a vision of angels seen there, he sends messengers to announce his approach as far as Seir, a district extending from the foot of the Dead Sea. There Esau was already established as the chieftain of a powerful tribe, for he sets forth to meet his brother at the head of 400 men. The peaceful company of Jacob are full of apprehension. he sends forward a splendid present of 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine, 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. He likewise takes the precaution of dividing his company into 2 parts, in order that if one shall be attacked, the other may escape. Having made these arrangements, he sends his family over a brook, called the Jabbok, which lay before him. In the night he is comforted by another symbolic vision, in which he supposes himself wrestling with a mysterious being, from whom he extorts a blessing, and is commanded from thenceforth to assume the name of Israel, the prevailing. For, having prevailed against God, so his race are to prevail against men. Yet he does not entirely relax his caution, as he and his family advance to meet the dreaded Esau. The handmaids and their children are put foremost, then Leah with hers. Last of all, as with the best chance of escape, should any treachery be intended, the favorite Rachel and her single child Joseph. But the hunter, though violent, was nevertheless frank, generous, and forgiving. While Jacob approaches with signs of reverence, perhaps of apprehension, Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. At first he refuses the offered present, but at length accepts it as a pledge of fraternal amity, and proposes that they should set forward together and unite their encampments. The cautious Jacob, still apprehensive of future misunderstandings, alleges the natural excuse that his party, encumbered with their cattle, their wives and children, must travel more slowly than the expeditious troop of the Edomites, and immediately on his brother's departure, instead of following him to Seir, turns off towards the Jordan, encamps first at Sukkot, then crosses the Jordan and settles near Shalem. Here he purchases a field of the inhabitants and resides in security until a feud with the princes of the country drives him forth to seek a safer encampment. Shechem, the son of Hamor, the great chieftain of the tribes which occupied that part of Canaan, violated Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. In all Arabian tribes, the brother is most deeply wounded by an outrage on the chastity of the females, a part of Spanish manners no doubt inherited from their Arabian ancestry. On him devolves the duty of exacting vengeance for the indignity offered to the tribe or family. Simeon and Levi, without consulting their father, take up the quarrel. Shechem offers to marry the damsel. His father and his people, not averse to an union with the wealthy strangers, consent to submit to circumcision as the condition of the marriage and as a pledge to the solemn union of the clans. While they are disabled from resistance by the consequences of the operation, Simeon and Levi, with their followers, fall on the city, put the inhabitants to the sword, and pillage the whole territory. The sense of this act of cruelty to his allies and disregard to his own authority sank deep into the heart of the peaceful Jacob. In his last vision, Simeon and Levi are reprobated as violent and bloodthirsty men, and, as if this dangerous disposition had descended upon their posterity, they are punished, or rather prevented from bringing ruin upon the whole race, by receiving a smaller and a divided portion of the promised land. Jacob retreated to Luz, where he had formerly parted from his brother Esau. Here the family was solemnly dedicated to God. All the superstitious practices which they had brought from Mesopotamia were forbidden. The little images of the tutelar deities, even the earrings, probably considered as amulets or talismans, were taken away and buried. On the other hand, the magnificent promise repeatedly made to Abraham and Isaac was once more renewed to Jacob. An altar was raised, and the place called Bethel, the house of God. From Luz, Jacob removed to Ephrat, or Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus Christ. There his favorite wife Rachel died in childbed, having given birth to his youngest son, called by the expiring mother Ben-Oni, the child of her sorrow, by the father Benjamin, the son of his right hand. Having raised a sepulchral pillar over her remains, he sets forth to a new settlement near the Tower of Edar, the site of which is unknown. Here his domestic peace was disturbed by another crime, the violation of his concubine, Bilhah, by Reuben, his eldest son. At length he rejoins his father, Isaac, in the plain of Mamre, where the old man dies, and is honorably buried by his two sons. But from henceforward the two branches of Isaac's family were entirely separated. The country about Mount Seir became the permanent residence of the Edomites, who were governed first by independent sheiks, or princes, afterwards were united under one monarchy. Jacob continued to dwell in Canaan with his powerful family and ample possessions, until dissensions among his sons prepared the way for more important changes, which seemed to break forever the connection between the race of Abraham and the land of Canaan, but ended in establishing them as the sole possessors of the whole territory. Here then let us pause, and, before we follow the family of Jacob into a country where the government and usages of the people were so totally different, look back on the state of society described in the patriarchal history. Mankind appears in its infancy, gradually extending its occupancy over regions, either entirely unappropriated or as yet so recently and thinly peopled as to admit, without resistance, the new swarms of settlers which seem to spread from the birthplace of the human race, the plains of Central Asia. They are peaceful pastoral nomads, traveling on their camels, the ass the only other beast of burden. The horse appears to have been unknown. Fortunately, perhaps, for themselves and their neighbors, for the possession of that animal seems fatal to habits of peace. The nomads, who are horsemen, are almost always marauders. The power of sweeping rapidly over a wide district and retreating as speedily offers irresistible temptation to a people of roaming and unsettled habits. But the unenterprising shepherds, from whom the Hebrew tribe descended, move onward as their convenience or necessity require, or as richer pastures attract their notice. Wherever they settle, they sink wells, and thus render unpeopled districts habitable. It is still more curious to observe how the progress of improvement is incidentally betrayed in the summary account of the ancient record. Abraham finds no impediment to his settling wherever fertile pastures invite him to pitch his camp. It is only a place of burial in which he thinks of securing a proprietary right. Jacob, on the contrary, purchases a field to pitch his tent. When Abraham is exposed to famine, he appears to have had no means of supply, but to go down himself to Egypt. In the time of Jacob, a regular traffic in corn existed between the two countries, and caravansaries were established on the way. Trading caravans had likewise begun to traverse the Arabian deserts with the spices and other products of the East, and with slaves, which they imported into Egypt. Among the simpler nomads of Mesopotamia, wages in money were unknown. Among the richer Phoenician tribes, gold and silver were already current. It has been the opinion of some learned men that Abraham paid the money for his bargain by weight, Jacob in pieces, rudely coined or stamped. When Abraham receives the celestial strangers with true Arabian hospitality, he kills the calf with his own hands, but has nothing more generous to offer than the Scythian beverage of milk. Yet the more civilized native tribes seem, by the offering of Melchizedek, to have had wine at their command. Isaac, become more wealthy, and having commenced the tillage of the soil, had acquired a taste for savory meats, and had wine for his ordinary use. The tillage of Isaac bespeaks the richness of a virgin soil, as yet unbroken by the plow. It returned 100 for 1. These primitive societies were constituted in the most simple and inartificial manner. The parental authority and that of the head of the tribe was supreme and without appeal. Esau so far respects even his blind and feeble father as to postpone the gratification of his revenge till the death of Isaac. Afterwards, the brothers who conspire against Joseph, though some of them had already dipped their hands in blood, dare not perpetrate their crime openly. When they return from Egypt to fetch Benjamin, in order to redeem one of their company, left in apparent danger of his life, they are obliged to obtain the consent of Jacob, and do not think of carrying him off by force. Reuben, indeed, leaves his own sons as hostages under an express covenant that they are to be put to death if he does not bring Benjamin back. The father seems to have processed the power of transferring the right of primogeniture to a younger son. This was perhaps the effect of Isaac's blessing. Jacob seems to have done the same, and disinherited the 3 elder sons of Leah. The desire of offspring and the pride of becoming the ancestor of a great people, with the attendant disgrace of barrenness, however in some degree common to human nature, and not unknown in thickly peopled countries, yet as the one predominant and absorbing passion, for such it is in the patriarchal history, belongs more properly to a period when the earth still offered ample room for each tribe to extend its boundaries without encroaching on the possessions of its neighbor. These incidents, in themselves trifling, are not without interest, both as illustrative of human manners and as tending to show that the record from which they are drawn was itself derived from contemporary traditions, which it has represented with scrupulous fidelity. Even the characters of the different personages are singularly in unison with the state of society described. There is the hunter, the migratory herdsman, and the incipient husbandman. The quiet and easy Isaac adapts himself to the more fixed and sedentary occupation of tillage. Esau the hunter is reckless, daring, and improvident. Jacob the herdsman, cautious, observant, subtle, and timid. Esau excels in one great virtue of uncivilized life, bravery. Jacob in another, which is not less highly appreciated, craft. Even in Abraham we do not find that nice and lofty sense of veracity which distinguishes a state of society where the point of honor has acquired great influence. It is singular that this accurate delineation of primitive manners and the discrimination of individual character in each successful patriarch, with all the imperfections and vices, as well of the social state as of the particular disposition, although so conclusive an evidence to the honesty of the narrative, has caused the greatest perplexity to many pious minds, and as great triumph to the adversaries of revealed religion. The object of this work is strictly historical, not theological. Yet a few observations may be ventured on this point, considering its important bearing on the manner in which Jewish history ought to be written and read. Some will not read the most ancient and curious history in the world, because it is in the Bible. Others read it in the Bible with a kind of pious awe, which prevents them from comprehending its real spirit. The latter look on the distinguished characters in the Mosaic annals as a kind of sacred beings, scarcely allied to human nature. Their intercourse with the divinity invests them with a mysterious sanctity, which is expected to extend to all their actions. Hence, when they find the same passions at work, the ordinary feelings and vices of human nature prevalent both among the ancestors of the chosen people and the chosen people themselves, they are confounded and distressed. Writers unfriendly to revealed religion, starting with the same notion that the Mosaic narrative is uniformly exemplary, not historical, have enlarged with malicious triumph on the delinquencies of the patriarchs and their descendants. Perplexity and triumph surely equally groundless. Had the avowed design of the intercourse of God with the patriarchs been their own unimpeachable perfection, had that of the Jewish polity been the establishment of a divine utopia, advanced to premature civilization, and overleaping at once those centuries of slow improvement, though which the rest of mankind were to pass, then it might have been difficult to give a reasonable account of the manifest failure. So far from this being the case, an ulterior purpose is evident throughout. The patriarchs and their descendants are the depositaries of certain great religious truths, the unity, omnipotence, and providence of God, not solely for their own use and advantage, but as conservators for the future universal benefit of mankind. Hence, provided the great end, the preservation of those truths, was eventually obtained, human affairs took their ordinary course. The common passions and motives of mankind were left in undisturbed operation. Superior in one respect alone, the ancestors of the Jews, and the Jews themselves, were not beyond their age or country in acquirements, in knowledge, or even in morals, as far as morals are modified by usage and opinion. They were polygamists, like the rest of the Eastern world. They acquired the virtues and the vices of each state of society through which they passed. Higher and purer notions of the deity, though they tend to promote and improve, by no means necessarily enforce moral perfection. Their influence will be regulated by the social state of the age in which they are promulgated, and the bias of the individual character to which they are addressed. Neither the actual interposition of the Almighty is in favor of an individual or nation, nor his employment of them as instruments for certain important purposes stamps the seal of divine approbation on all their actions. In some cases, as in the deception practiced by Jacob on his father, the worst part of their character manifestly contributes to the purpose of God. Still, the nature of the action is not altered. It is to be judged by its motive, not by its undesigned consequence. Allowance, therefore, being always made for their age and social state, the patriarchs, kings, and other Hebrew worthies are amenable to the same verdict which would be passed on the eminent men of Greece or Rome, excepting where they act under the express commandment of God. They have no exemption from the judgment of posterity, and on the same principle, while God is on the scene, the historian will write with caution and reverence, while men with freedom, justice, and impartiality. Next time, we'll look at Book 2.